Mangoba, we saw that the proceedings just wrapped up. Just to summarize, some of what the president said, as well as even the National Commissioner, General Cele, talking about how thankless, being a man or woman in blue is, that job, that thankless job.
Indeed, Masiko, and those are the sentiments that we've heard from some of the speeches that have been delivered here, really praising the role and the selfless sacrifice that these men in blue and women in blue and police reservists had actually given in their line of duty. Of course, as you have pointed out, 34 of them were being honored here this morning, and it was really an emotional day for the families that were here this morning, who really came to remember their loved ones, but also to ensure that their honor and the service that they had given to the country is remembered and honored. And of course, during some of the speeches that we heard from the police minister, also paying tribute to over 800 of those police women and men who lost their life to COVID-19, and really calling on communities to actually work alongside the police, to partner with police to try and stop the scourge of police killings in the country. Of course, the minister saying that an attack and the killing of police is an attack on the nation and the state, and therefore this should be condemned in the strongest sense. But also saying that, they will be also calling on or observing, in fact, that those who have died do not die in vain. They are calling for stringent action to be taken and for law enforcement to really play its role in trying to curb police killings in the country. But the president also alluding to the fact that communities cannot just simply be bystanders when it comes to the issue of police killings, and that communities will have to take an active role in protecting the police themselves. And we did see earlier on a march of honor for these men and women in blue who have died, as well as their names being read out here. Of course, it was quite emotional for some of the families that were here. But the president really, Masiko, also calling on the police to use the police safety strategy that was announced by the police ministry to defend themselves and the country. But of course, he also touched on the recent unrest that we saw in the country, saying that it has caused some sort of doubt to many South Africans, the way that police responded to that. But he says that he has, is quite confident that the police have quite a strong capability in this country to deal with crime affecting communities. So really the call being made to communities at large to play their role in fighting crime and to protect the communities at large.
We did see some of those family members that were actually being escorted sort of by police officers as they were crying. I saw visuals of a young girl also being carried and a woman who was in a wheelchair. So very emotional for them, Mango. But have we gotten a chance to speak to any of those family members about, the commemoration of their loved ones who were killed in the line of duty?
Well, Masiko, at this particular point, we haven't been able to speak to the families. We were trying to speak to some of them, but of course we've been told that we might get a chance to do that a little bit later. But of course, it has been quite emotional for many of them, as you can imagine, Masiko. These were some of the breadwinners. These were sisters, these were brothers, these were fathers to some of these relatives that had gathered here. So it was quite an emotional day for many of them here. Of course, recalling the last day that they saw their loved ones going to work, and you can imagine, Masiko, the pain that some of them are going through. But of course,
Mangoba, at the moment, actually, we're seeing the president as well as the police minister, visuals of them showing right now live on ENCA, with the president and the minister speaking to those family members who were there, as their loved ones were commemorated. He's currently speaking to a woman, possibly, who lost a husband or a brother, but definitely a loved one in the line of duty. So I just wanted to alert you, Manqoba, that you were answering that question, both the minister and the president are currently with the families right now, speaking to them. And as we play those visuals, Manqoba, I just wanted us to speak specifically about how both the minister, the president, and even the national commissioner was saying that, you know, there's been a breakdown in terms of communities and police and how they interact. There's now loss of respect for, you know, men and women in blue. It seems, you know, as you were interviewing the commissioner earlier on today, he was saying that South Africa is a very violent nation, and it's become a very uncomfortable environment for police officers who work in this country.
Indeed, Masiko, and of course it is quite concerning, says the National Commissioner, that, you know, there seems to be a breakdown between relations between police as well as communities in some of the areas. Of course, you'll know that there have been quite a number of complaints that have been leveled against the police by some of the communities who say that police are simply not doing their jobs enough. So he says that this is one of the issues that, of course, they'll aim to restore that trust between communities as well as the police. But beyond that, he says that, you know, police simply cannot do it alone. And I think those are the same sentiments that are echoed by President Cyril Ramaphosa this morning, saying that, you know, police cannot do it alone. They need the involvement of community members. They need community members to be active in reporting crimes, because criminals really live in the societies and the communities. And so it will be up to community members working together with police to ensure that we nip crime in the bud in our communities, but also to ensure that we have a stronger police force, a respected police force that is able to deliver on its constitutional mandate to serve and protect the country.
And Manqoba, it was also, you know, we saw on the visuals from our side, and I can imagine where you were, you know, an emotional time for the families as the president and other speakers reiterated how difficult it is, you know, the understanding of anxiety for police officers, because you leave your house and you don't know whether you're going to come back. So it's your anxiety as the police officer, but your family members as well, who understand that, you know, you're serving the country, but also are left at home wondering if you'll come back.
And that's a reality, Masiko, that is facing many of these families who have loved ones who work in the police force, never knowing whether their loved one will come back home or not. And certainly it is a reality that many of the families that are here, that are gathered here this morning, have faced. And it is quite painful for many of them. Masiko, as you saw earlier on in those visuals, some of them battling to contain their emotions because the wounds are still really fresh for many of them. The loss is still very fresh. And really it is a time when they are, you know, just celebrating and, you know, a moment where they're coming to terms with their loss. Of course, their names will be engraved here at the memorial wall of remembrance for the police. But for these families, it's their family member, it's their loved ones that has died. It's their loved ones that is not coming home. So it really hits home, you know, this crime of killing police in the country, and really, you know, open questions about whether or not the police safety strategy that is in place is doing enough in the country to curb police killings. Of course, certainly the sentiments from some of the quotas, the unions or so, is that there simply is not enough that this particular strategy is doing to try, even though the numbers have decreased over the years. But 34 policemen dying on duty is still too much a number.
And you can imagine, Manqoba, I was speaking to Pop Crew as you're talking about unions and their discussions with government. When I spoke to Pop Crew this morning, Mamabolo was telling me, Richard Mamabolo, the spokesperson, was telling me that 9 police officers were killed in South Africa in the past week. We know that there were 5 people who were arrested for the murder of those 2 police officers in Mareatsani in the northwest. And we're talking about statistics of police officers who passed away after that 34 number we found out between April last year and March this year. So between March this year to date, there's been a whole lot more police officers killed in the line of duty.
Indeed, Masiko, and in fact, when he opened his speech, the police minister saying that, just this weekend alone, they have buried 3 police officers, and these were police officers who were simply killed for their service pistols. So he says that, it seems as if, these criminals are content on continuing with their crime, on killing police officers. And this is something that he says needs to stop. So he says that as the police minister, they will leave no stone unturned in terms of dealing with the issue of police killings, and saying that really the law must act strongly against those who kill policemen. He says it's simply not acceptable that we have a situation where police will be killed by a criminal. So there was such very strong words from the minister in terms of, condemning the killing of police, but also in terms of action, the police minister saying that the police must defend themselves. They must ensure that, at all times that they do not fall a prey or victim to criminal activities. So many of the families, of course, Masiko, it was very hard for them to actually hear from the presidents those words of condolences from the president, simply because their loved ones are no more.
And I think it would be very important for that. We're seeing, just for me to describe to you what the viewers and I are seeing at the moment, the president speaking to 2 young boys. He started with a young girl who had a teddy bear in her hand. I think this was the young girl that at some point had to be carried by a police officer because she was feeling very emotional. So, just to speak to what you're saying, Mangoba, about these families, hearing from the president and the minister themselves about the condolences. We've seen, Mangoba, for instance, with the 2 officers in the Northwest that I alluded to. They were found burnt to death in the back of a police van in the Northwest. 5 people arrested there. But also, you find out, like you said earlier, people like Charles Kinnear, who, were let down by the police force itself in terms of protecting him, knowing what he was investigating.
Indeed, Masiko, and we were hoping to speak to Nicolette Kinnear about her experiences. What we do understand, though, Masiko, at this particular point is that the family has now been actually afforded state protection by the police. But of course, some would say it's a little too late, given the fact that Colonel or Lieutenant Colonel Charles Kinnear himself, his security detail was removed just before his killing. So these are some of the issues, of course, that have been thrust into the spotlight. The safety of those particular men and women in blue who really are dealing with, matters of serious nature, including the matter of, gang-related violence. So how serious really do police take the safety of these men and women to consideration? Of course, the impact that is felt by the families, Masiko, you can imagine with those 2 young children that you speak of, they have lost a father, they've lost loved ones, and so the impact for those families is something that will remain for many years to come. And are the police doing enough in terms of the police safety strategy? Are communities playing their part? Well, those are some of the questions that we really have, to consider as a nation and see whether or not we can also play our active role in trying to protect some of these police officers.
Definitely, Mangoba. And I think I heard the president at some point speak about the unrest that we saw in South Africa. He spoke about, the disrespect of, police officers by those who, for instance, were looting right in front of the police officers. Here and there, of course, the police officers, there's also accusations of inaction. We know that in South Africa, we don't really have a perfect, police force. But the president speaking specifically about that unrest and showing some confidence really in his police minister again, in terms of, what happened during those unrest, even though he did announce, Mangoba, in in Parliament on Friday that there would be some sort of investigation and an independent investigation into policing and state security about the unrest. Just explain to us, or rather summarize to us, what exactly was said, in particular about policing during the unrest.
Indeed, Maseko, the president did touch on the issue of policing during the unrest. In fact, this is one of the questions that are earlier posed to the National Commissioner himself, to ask him, what he made of the police response. And of course, he says that, he's not ashamed of the way in which the police responded to that particular unrest. They were overstretched. There were issues of capacity at most of these police stations. But he says that there are lessons to be learned from this. And he says, as police, these are lessons that they will certainly take forward in dealing with future unrest. But the president also relaying, his faith in the police service, saying that, the police capability is strong at this particular point. He knows that there has been a doubt that was created to many of the South Africans in terms of how the police have handled or had handled the unrest that we saw in the country. But he says that, of course, some of those answers, some of those questions will be answered when that particular inquest looking specifically at how police responded to the unrest get underway. It is a probe that will take place and looking specifically at what lessons could be learned from this particular unrest and how the police have actually responded to this. So certainly the president saying that there are lessons to be learned, but of course he says the police, he believes, are still doing a good job in the country.
Let's talk a little bit about the National Commissioner and, what he said when he spoke to the police officers as well as the families that, were there. He spoke a lot about how police officers should not really bother caring what people think of them, and they should rather continue doing their jobs.
Yes, Masiko, and he says that this is a selfless sacrifice, a selfless job that requires the police to really do their part and play their constitutional mandate in fighting crime and to protect and to serve the people of South Africa. So he says that the death of these policemen should not be in vain, Masiko, and really that the police, should do their part in also protecting their colleagues. And, really a strong message coming out, Masiko, this morning from the police commissioner saying that, communities will also have to play their part in defending the police. And more than anything, he says that the Criminal Procedure Act and the criminal justice system will really need to act tough against those who are involved in criminals or criminal activities that target police. So a really strong call to the criminal justice system to also take its part, to do its part in curbing this particular issue, this particular scourge of policemen that fall victim to prey. Of course, he says that there is a modus operandi that, some of these criminals are using, but this is all part of that police safety strategy to look at the ways in which they can perhaps, curb or find the strategies or ways in which they can stop the killing of police here in the country.
All right, Mangoba Mkhunu, let's leave it there for now.